Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Living Ancestor Podcast. This is your host, Ramon Castellanos. Today, I would love to discuss destiny with you. Specifically, the exploration of two potent metaphors that can help us orientate towards destiny in a way that's more functional and embodied. So, one thing to understand about destiny overall is that it is a lived experience and it is a process. So it's not something that we can classify as a kind of noun or even a destination. Destiny unfolds through the unfolding of life. And whether or not we're aligned with it has a lot to do with how we are orientating to the moment as it emerges, and how we organize ourselves in response to what occurs. Now, with that said, these two metaphors seem almost opposed to each other in terms of the energetic dynamics that they describe at an embodied level. And this is very helpful, actually, because one is that each metaphor may speak to a different kind of person. And actually, depending on where you're at in life, if you're overly fixated on the one that feels the most comfortable, then the opposite metaphor can actually be a kind of medicine for you. And that's the beauty of this. And they also both describe how one relates to the experience of life at different times depending on what's happening. So with that said, let's go ahead and explore the two metaphors, and then I'll tie it together as we go along with what destiny is in terms of a functional process. So the first metaphor is one that I have worked with a lot and I have spoken about a lot in my teachings, and that is the ship in sail. And this is something that I have come across in multiple traditions. One of the ones that sticks out the most is Hellenistic astrology, and how they would speak about your sun sign, your moon sign, and your ascendant as the different people who were responsible for steering a ship, and that life itself was a ship in sail. And this is a helpful metaphor for a lot of reasons. One is that if we are consciously engaged with the sailing of the ship, then we are already in alignment with destiny. The destination one is going towards actually defines the ship in sail as a process, because if the process itself is not coherent and aimed at a particular outcome, a North Star, so to speak, which is one of the metaphors I like to use, or simply a destination in and of itself, then the ship cannot arrive. So it actually points towards that process of managing a ship and its resources, of the helmsman being able to see the helm, of being able to manage the crew, so to speak, of keeping everything coherent when you deal with inclement weather, for example, or waves that can be really disruptive. And all these different forces that are attempting to, perhaps not consciously attempting, but nonetheless, the effect is an attempt to derail you from the outcome. For example, I mean, if you were to just let go of the ship totally and not have some kind of conscious focus on the process, then you would not get to the destination. Yeah. So it means that there is this sense of life being a journey, which is, of course, a cliche, but a useful one nonetheless because it describes a process. And that process in this way asks us to understand what we have at our disposal. So that could be literally the food that is on the ship, along with the crew and the kind of ship you have, the maps that you have available to you, the navigation equipment that you have, and also the knowledge and the skills that have been acquired. And in this sense, when we're talking about destiny, the knowledge and the skills are not just the actual things that we have focused on in day-to-day life to develop, but also the inherent and innate gifts and talents that you were born with, which are products of the soul. The soul is the one that comes with the gifts and the talents already preceded inside of them. So at this level, we're taking a look at life in a holistic sense that's in movement, that's encountering different kinds of obstacles, and that has a particular orientation, and that is dealing with all of these different challenges on a consistent basis in the process of a journey. And it's an active journey. Yeah, you're working, you're moving, you're dealing with all of these shifts on a consistent basis. And if the process is coherent, then it takes you to a destination. But the important thing to recognize here is that the metaphor for living in alignment with destiny is the ship in sail. It is a verb. It is that process. It's not necessarily the destination. You could almost think of it as taking off to a land that you have never been to, and all you have are the tools that we've already spoken about, the resources we've spoken about, to make your way there. And when you get there, you don't really know what is going to be waiting. You just know that if you keep everything coherent and aligned, and you keep the management, so to speak, of the ship coherent, then you'll get there. Now, this is a metaphor that is very helpful for people who are often more go with the flow kind of people, yeah? That they feel that everything will just kind of unfold as it needs to unfold without any kind of conscious participation. Now, that kind of energy can be extremely useful, but without the conscious engagement piece, you're not actually in alignment with destiny. If there's one core feature that can show you alignment with destiny, it is conscious, active participation. Now, one of the ways that this is helpful to relate to, and once I lay down this foundation, we'll get to the next metaphor, is to think of destiny almost on an axis that is at cross purposes with fate. Now, that's a helpful starting point. There is fate and there is destiny. And fate is the circumstances that present themselves in life that are not the result of our conscious active participation. So most of what happens to us is fated. And more so even when we step back and realize that we were born into fated circumstances. And this ranges from the time and the place that we were born into, the family that we were born into, the body that we have, and the cultural and societal conditionings that we've received, what religion we were happened to be raised in. All of that and more could be thought of as fate. So already when you're born, you come into this kind of soil environment, right? This ground that establishes a kind of momentum. And that momentum unfolds a particular way. And that's what we could think of as fate. It's a set of established probabilities that are very likely to occur within the context of a momentum that is driving that set of probabilities. So an interesting way to think about this is, let's say that you were a miner's son, like a miner, like somebody who goes into mines and pulls out ore, for example, or coal or something like that. And your father and their father and possibly even their father were all miners. And so now, from a fated perspective, you just step into that role and you allow yourself to be a miner. And that's it, right? There's no conscious active participation piece necessarily. There's just everybody did this and now I do this too. That would be a very clear example of fate driving a particular outcome. Now, the destiny piece of this would be for someone to begin to wake up, perhaps, to innate gifts and talents that they have, and to a spark somewhere, a sense of possibility that is beyond the probabilities. So that would be the axes of destiny. When we're thinking about possibility, when we are starting to bring our gifts and our talents on board, so to speak, to alchemize the fated circumstances. Now, maybe, the upbringing they had inside of a miner's family made them a hardworking person and gave them a sense of duty and honor and responsibility and all of this, right? But they were born with a gift for medicine and for understanding how systems come together, and they have the soul of a healer, perhaps. And now they take that set of gifts and predispositions and they bring them to bear in medical school with the sense of duty and honor and responsibility and hardworking nature that they got from being raised in a miner's family. And they make a different choice in life, right? They break a pattern, perhaps, and they shift. And then they become a physician who helps people. Now, there's nothing wrong with being a miner, but the context here matters. So what we see in this way is that fate is a ground, and it is a set of probabilities that are unfolding with a momentum. And destiny is when we become an active, conscious participant, and we find that there's actually a precededness, like a seed, inside of that fate. And that the conscious active participation is a catalyst that begins to grow a tree inside the soil of that fate. And now this is the other metaphor, and that anchors into the seed is destined to become the tree. So within a seed, there is a blueprint for a tree. And in this case, I would like to use the metaphor of a fruit tree. So this metaphor is actually really helpful for people who are excessively willful and super driven and super destination focused. That is, if I don't get there, it's not destiny, right? This very on or off, it is or it isn't, black and white sense of destiny. Because a tree doesn't go anywhere. A tree experiences an unfolding, a process in which the preceded nature that already exists inside of the seed cracks open. And it anchors with roots and it grows towards the sun. And if it has the resources, such as the nutrients in the soil and the light and warmth of the star of our solar system and the water that it needs, and of course the the proper resistance from the winds that can help strengthen it. Then the seed begins to unfold, and it grows, and eventually if it has what it needs, if it has the resources it requires, will bear fruit. And the fruiting, so to speak, is the destiny. So what we see is that destiny in this way is simply the unfolding of a process already innately inherent inside of you. And that within that, there is the fruit that you are here to bear. And then as the process unfolds, one does not actually go anywhere, so to speak, but simply blossoms. And this is a beautiful metaphor as well for this kind of orientation. Now, the way that they intersect is that the way that a person governs the ship, so to speak, is already a part of their preceded nature. They have a style, so to speak. They have a way of doing things. Someone who leads a ship like a warrior is different than someone who leads a ship like a healer. Now, not to say that either one of those would necessarily be the same person or the best person to to sail a ship. It's a metaphor, yeah? It's speaking about a way of orientating as one faces the unfolding process of life and how one manages the resources, so to speak, how one talks to the crew of the ship, how one deals with needing to correct things that aren't functioning the way that is best. All of that plays a role. How one navigates, how well they navigate. And all of this is a part of this preceded nature already to some degree, and the fated circumstances that the person who is sailing the ship, the captain, is responsible for, based off of what they encountered from fated circumstances and what was preceded already. So these two metaphors actually tie into each other in a very beautiful way, and they are medicine for perhaps a person who is really focused on one aspect versus the other, but also work really well to help us both be proactive in the process of engaging with life in order to unfold destiny, such as the person who's responsible for sailing the ship and managing the crew and navigating, as well as understanding the preceded nature that is already inherent within us. And that in this way, if we can give ourselves the resources that we require and settle into the kind of tree, so to speak, that we are, and to know that it is already within us, then the conscious active participation piece is the catalyst that begins to unfold this process that is already there, that has come with you, with your soul to this life, and that we don't actually need to go anywhere. And it's not about getting somewhere so much as it is about unfolding the organic process within. Now, I hope that these two metaphors can be helpful to you, and that they can be myths, if required, in times where you're feeling challenged around how to orientate towards destiny. But it's important to recognize that destiny is in the process. In a sense, it is in the unfolding. Despite the fact that there could be a destination or fruit to bear, none of those things can be arrived at without the all of the process that comes before it, that is occurring as an emergence through our orientation in the moment. Okay, be well, my friends.